Hello and welcome to ET CFO Leadership Dialogues. Today we have with us Ramesh Swaminathan, Executive Director and Group CFO of Lupin. Thanks, Ramesh, for being here. Over the next half an hour or so, I would like to know about your journey and where is Lupin headed in the coming years. So let's start with what drew you into finance, and was it a choice or by accident?
No, I think it was certainly a choice. You're actually drawing me back to my starting year, so to speak. If I go down the path of memory lane, finance has always interested me. More because the fact that I perhaps come from a family of people from the finance function, so to speak. My dad was the CFO of a pretty large company before he went into general management. My granddad was also from the same profession. So essentially, that must have drawn me to finance, in that perspective. But clearly, the function excited me a lot. Having grown up with a lot of conversations around me around topics which generally interest finance people. But clearly, when I started my journey, also I was intrigued by various interesting concepts in finance, and that drove my passion for finance. I started off with, in fact, a bank. I was a part of treasury also, which is one of the more exciting divisions in a bank, and then went on to heading corporate finance across various corporates. So clearly, it's been something which has been, from my perspective, a designed career move, so to speak.
We are in this transformation period in finance where a lot of automation, RPA is taking over what used to happen in Excel. So, when it comes to deploying these technology, where is Lupin in this journey?
Very interesting question. So, as I said, given our passion for being on top of things and being very contemporary, we have obviously adopted the latest of technologies when it comes to, in fact, finance function as well. So it is not merely RPAs, it's gone a lot beyond that. So if we speak about potentially a lot of this repetitive work, we obviously worked on the entire RPA journey quite some time ago, which is 5, 6 years ago, and had close to about perhaps 100 bots, so to speak, working for us. But apart from that, there is a host of things which are now evolving. It's essentially looking at the Gen AI and AI for a host of things. We created the, so to speak, a financial services center, which kind of centralized a lot of work from across the globe and the like. But going down the path of analytics, and then now today embracing a lot of Gen AI concepts in order to automate and bring in faster decision making, taking into account a host of things, as I said, looking at the inside outside, so to speak, connecting the dots. So clearly every part of the function, so to speak, which is essentially the custodial functions, being a partner with business, communicating value to business, all of this would potentially be done through, in fact, a lot of technological measures. So we are very much on the curve, and wanting to do a lot more in the quarters to come.
Are there any examples or use cases that come to mind that you might have recently deployed when you talk about Gen AI or AI? You said RPAs happened 6 years ago or something.
Clearly, it's a continuous journey. Gen AI is a more, and agentic AI is, of course, a more recent concept. We are in discussion with, in fact, a host of vendors and consultancy firms to kind of work with us on several use cases. We do have a plan in place, but of course, we need to kind of draw out the benefits coming in from those, weighing it out, and because it's not really rushing into technology for the sake of rushing into it. It's also all about actually carrying value into the business itself. So clearly, that evaluation is currently on, and we'll be into implementation mode in the next few days, so to speak.
All right. Another interesting conversation that is happening these days is around hiring of talent, right? And when these technologies have come in the finance function, what are the conversations you are having internally to ensure onboarding the right finance talent in this day and age? What are your expectations from a finance employee who is applied for a job in your team? So what kind of expectations do you have at this point?
From my perspective, in some ways, what I said has been my learnings. I would like to look at, in fact, their learnings from from the jobs that they are in. So clearly, if they demonstrate value in trying to change things, to challenge status quo, I'd be very happy to go with that kind of a person. So clearly, a person is open to adopting technologies, looking at, in fact, and taking an outside-in view of the business itself, and of course, who has a reputation, a track record of attracting talent around himself. So all of these would be very important factors that I would also look into. So the track record is very important from my perspective, apart from his pedigree from academics perspective. So clearly, academic excellence plus, of course, his track record of performance in previous organizations along the lines that I just spoke about would be very important for me to gauge a person.
And we've spoken about the geopolitics and the macro uncertainty. As a CFO of a large pharma company, going through these global macro uncertainty and innovation-led competition, what are the things that keep you on your toes?
That's a very interesting question, really. And the number of things that are happening when it comes to, in fact, the industry that I'm in, clearly this is, so there are two parts to the story. One is the fact that in the generic world, it's all about huge upside on launch, and then thereafter a continuous downside because things are rushing all the time. So clearly price erosion. So essentially being on top of your entire cost structure is very important. So clearly, every lever in associated with, in fact, cost reduction would be part of my armory, so to speak, when I look at my operations around. Clearly, also, one has to look at the future. So, going beyond generics, going beyond the pill. So there are several approaches that one could look at. So and this could potentially be designed for individual markets. For India, so you could have several levers for just the India operation. But you could also look at the entire market and look at beyond the pill kind of an approach. To be a little more specific, for example, in the case of India, the strategy to follow is more feet on the ground, a very robust portfolio from within your own stable, looking at in-license portfolio, and of course M&A. So those could potentially be levers, but at the same time, you could also have sub-levers in terms of going beyond the pill. So you could embrace things like adjacencies, like wellness, diagnostics, and digital health, and the like as well. But if you look at overall pharma, it's also important to kind of recognize that companies will have to move beyond generics and look at, in fact, specialty. So how do you look at specialty? How do you allocate resources to kind of balance risk versus return and the like? So these are very important challenges that one faces. And obviously, it calls for a lot of discussions with your peers, with the investors to get to kind of gauge their own understanding of the situation and what their expectations are. And all of this clearly keeps me awake all the time.
Yeah. While we are on market shifts and uncertainty, the US, is seeing an uncertain time in terms of policy. And there were recently talks around lowering drug pricing. If that were to happen, what kind of impact can it have on the Indian pharmaceutical industry, do you think? Or do you think that is even a probable policy change that will take place?
That's a very interesting question and perhaps a multi-billion dollar question that everybody seems to be asking. Clearly, there has been a pause here because the US president is waiting for this Section 230 to report before he actually can take or order status quo to be maintained when it comes to pharmaceuticals. But I would actually bucketize, potentially the outcomes into four or five buckets. Firstly, as you would understand, as you would appreciate, generic industry is all about access to medicine. So we are about making sure that there is, the possibility of every person being affordable, making things affordable for every person around, and access to medicines itself. Clearly, that would potentially be appended in the event, you have tariffs imposed on a lot of products because clearly it's a question of whether it would work, with the audience can work with, in fact, a higher price. The second is essentially when he talks about reciprocal arrangements and the like. If there is so there is clearly no tariffs at this stage, and if India has, in fact, a tariff on, on 400 millions out of the $800 million worth of imports that happens from America, and if you were to kind of zeroize the structure, would that actually work for America? That's the second question. Third, you could also look at potentially looking at an arrangement where you could be, kind of, manufacturing in America, which of course works with him. But clearly, it also has a lot to do with, in fact, where it works for every kind of product. So there are products based again on economics that you can manufacture out there. But clearly, the cost of manufacture in America is going to be a multiple of, in fact, what is done in India. So one has to be conscious of that. So clearly, yeah, and there are, of course, this possibility of where we, are in a position to kind of pass on the cost to, to the consumers out there because they're willing to kind of absorb it and so on. So a lot of possibilities, and clearly too many moving parts for
Yeah,
us to comment about.
yeah.
One has to wait and watch.
Yeah, at this point, one can only prepare for all the possible scenarios and wait for what the president has to say on the given day when he announces things around pharmaceuticals segment.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
clearly.
it has been exempt till now, and a lot of pharmaceutical uh, CXOs are hoping that it stays that way. Coming to the business aspect of Lupin, you mentioned about focusing and diverting the focus towards specialty business, and you're also focusing on biosimilars over the past few years. So, if I had to ask you about your portfolio, what will be your strategy for scaling these segments? And over the next 3, 4, or 5 years, what will your portfolio look like?
Yeah, so we have been pretty vocal about this position for some time now. Clearly, we are trying to move out of commoditized generic, so to speak, and move into more complex value-added stuff. And what actually suggests itself is essentially the entire respiratory portfolio, complex injectables, and biosimilars, so to speak. Clearly, our success in the case of the respiratory portfolio is been flagged off with the kind of products that we brought to the market, which includes albuterol. We had Spiriva. We were the first to bring in Foster into Europe and the like, and a host of other products that we'll be looking at from a respiratory perspective. Equally, on the complex injectables front, there's a lot of things that we're bringing to the table. Even recently, we just got approved for glucagon. We got approved for liraglutide and the like. So we are looking at a host of other products out there as well. But and clearly, we have the benefit of potentially being early entrants into to biosimilars as well. And from my perspective, it's an important part because clearly the framework associated with biosimilars is changing in America. So clearly, this feature of interchangeability, which actually enables a lot of substitution from a product perspective. Clearly that works in one's favor. The second, essentially, the fact that you could have private labels, so that could potentially work because you could get into arrangements with a lot of channel partners for enabling that to happen. The third most important development from my perspective is the fact that they are using, and not necessarily for all products, but clearly, there has been some pathway which has been identified using, in fact, biomarkers instead of, in fact, a full pharmacodynamics study. Essentially, instead of full PD studies, looking at certain biomarkers for certain products, and that would actually kind of shorten the time period associated for entry into the American market. Clearly, that would be of great advantage to anybody who's wanting to crack this biologics biosimilars field open for various markets. So exciting times, with a lot of possibilities, of course, challenges, but clearly we seem to have, in fact, the right tools in our armory to get this cracking.
Yeah, recently the quarter has been very good for you. What kind of over the next few years, what kind of is there any growth rate that is there in your mind that you want to uh, achieve or kind of get to?
Clearly, we have a very what we think is going to be a very exciting dream for all of us. clearly taking advantage of, in fact, the areas that we've got into and realizing its full potential in terms of respiratory, the complex injectables and biosimilars and the like. If you just step back and look at the last 5 years, it's been a period of a lot of changes for us. Clearly, our EBITDA margins were on the lower side of what it should have been. And it touched a nadir of about 10.5% about a few years ago. But since then, a lot of things have changed. We have focused tremendously on three things. Essentially, the first, I would say, working on, in fact, the top line. So the top line buoyancy, aided by, in fact, a lot of products that we brought to the market, clearly helped us because, and some of these, obviously, which is the respiratory products and some of these other products that I just spoke about. The second is the incessant focus, the never-ending focus on costs. Clearly, that's very clearly visible in terms of the kind of gross margins movement that we saw, and in fact, every metric down the entire P&L structure, so to speak. We worked on alternate vendor development, routes to synthesis, rationalization of labor at the sales force level, at the R&D level, the manufacturing level, addressing the footprint, so to speak, bringing down the idle time, bringing down the SG&A costs associated with our business and the like, and clearly brought the EBITDA margins to a very healthy 25% odd. And if you were to knock out the impact of, in fact, some of those adjacencies that we got into, which is the digital health, the diagnostics, and the like, clearly we are at least a good, another 200 basis points higher. So clearly, there has been a lot of success in recent times, but we are not complacent about it. We believe that there is a lot more potential to doing a lot more, and we are working on that. And with, in fact, the plans that we have, we are pretty pleased about what could potentially be the future for us.
Right. So you will keep on working on the adjustments that you've done on the past, and those will be the step forward, or
Apart
there are
from that,
other things.
we would, of course, be working on those as foundation blocks, but I think clearly looking at top line growth, coming in from, in fact, the thrust on more complex generics and perhaps specialty over the quarters to come.
Right. The focus is on top line at this point. And in how are you approaching capital allocation at this time? What kind of cash do you have on your balance sheet, and how are you looking to deploy it in terms of organic or inorganic expansion across in coming years?
Clearly, as with every finance person, the most important task ahead of us really essentially is capital allocation. So I've always held the maxim that money should flow where the yield is going to be the highest, and clearly capital allocation from that perspective is very important. We have over the last several years ensured, and we've made some bad decisions in the past in terms of our own M&A, but today, with, in fact, a lot more calibrated approach, we have seen a very healthy growth in terms of our return on capital employed. It's close to about 23-24%, but clearly we think that there should be more out of it. And the steps that we have taken in the past, and for that matter, what we'll be taking in the future is, we're going down that path of actually increasing it. There is, in fact, threshold limits being, of course, imposed on us by the board in terms of the quantum of monies that you'd be putting into adjacencies, and clearly reserving a larger chunk of it for potentially the future of the pharmaceuticals business itself, both when it comes to the current business as well as into the specialty business that you would like to get into. We would be very keen on getting into acquisitions in India for sure, because that's certainly of focus to us. But equally, looking at areas where we believe that we can grow our business, as in the case of Europe, with, again, and the emphasis on the right kind of products that you'd buy out there, or for that matter, the companies. And lastly, on specialty. But having seen and said all of this, we would, of course, put a threshold limit in terms of overall monies that you'd be borrowing for this purpose. And we believe that, it would be about twice the EBITDA, so to speak. So that would potentially mean that we are in a position to borrow close to about $1.5 to $2 billion, given our EBITDA run rate at this juncture. But we'd appreciate that it's a pretty large sum of money, given the fact that we are a debt-free company today.
Right. So if you're saying that if there was an opportunity interesting enough, your balance sheet allows you the comfort of um, getting a debt of around a billion or $1.5 billion, and moving into these acquisitions in Europe. And the focus is obviously on India right now as well, because your portfolio is kind of half and half divided into what you export and what is there in the Indian pharmaceutical market. Um, and in terms of compliance, since CFO's role revolves around compliance, though in the last few years there's less focus there, because a lot of these things are automated, and but compliance keeps changing in pharma, in finance. So, are there any opportunities or challenges that you see in the domestic as well as global markets when it comes to compliance?
So we obviously place a lot of emphasis on being right when it comes to compliance matters. And if you look at, in fact, our track record, so whilst we had, in fact, 5 factories which were under warning letter about 5 years ago, it's since then been, we've had immediately after COVID, a lot of success in this regard, with, in fact, three of the plants getting off it as well. So clearly, quality and compliance is of paramount importance to us, and you've given it the importance that it deserves. And clearly, we will do what it takes to kind of ensure that going forward it remains the same. But you speak about, if you talk about compliance from a finance perspective, again, we are a very compliant company from every perspective, and we actually uphold governance of the highest order, so to speak, and that's reflected in the kind of ESG ratings that we get. There's a G in the ESG, so to speak.
Is there anything that you're looking from Indian government in terms of uh, pushing the pharmaceutical industries or easing some sort of compliance? Is there anything on those lines?
Clearly, my expectations from the government of India for for support for this industry is there. So I would, for example, quote, in fact, the situation in other parts of the globe where research and development actually gets either a weighted deduction or some kind of tax credits and the like, which used to be there in India, but unfortunately was removed. I also look forward to, in fact, changes in the GST regime, which is imminent. So there are a lot of embedded taxes when it goes into absorption of at the cost level, which is the GST on electricity, petroleum products, and the like as well. So clearly, those are sore points with us. And there's, of course, the inverted tax structure when it comes to GST. The API is taxed at a higher rate than formulations. So that's an anomaly which actually blocks up working capital for us and the like. So clearly, there's a lot to be expected. The PLI, of course, has been a great help to us in recent times, but it's also 3 years in the and the next couple of years you'll be kind of coming out of it, and if that can be extended, it'll be a good thing. And most importantly, the kind of incentives that the government has been talking about in terms of primary research in India, and incentives for overall research and coming out with creative products, differentiated products. Looking forward to, in fact, getting this off the ground, and clearly a lot more enabling structure, so to speak, in terms of alliances between industry and academia, and potentially the FTAs of the world, which will help in potentially collaborating with the rest of the world in order to make things more attractive for us.
Right. The GST that you spoke about, as we speak, there are proposals and things that we're hearing in the media that there will be only two slabs. So there are a lot of inverted duty structure might get simplified after that, and I'm sure there will be demands post that. Once we know what is there, it'll be more clearer. Coming back to the pharmaceutical industry, your company is going towards biosimilars and specialty business. Do you think overall mood in the pharmaceutical is changing towards this, and the industry has realized that from where it is right now uh, uh, to going maybe growing double than what it is today? Now it has hit a kind of a threshold where from generics you can only extract that much.
The fact of the matter is, India is still a vast country with where there's tremendous, capacity, because the per capita consumption of medicine is still pretty low. I think a lot needs to be done, and that starts with, in fact, the four A's of any healthcare system, so to speak. The first is, of course, the awareness of disease, the first instance, which calls for infrastructure and the like as well. Second is, of course, looking at access to medicines, which is, of course, enabling structures, including the GST and the like. The third is, of course, looking at availability of medicine, and that's clearly a function of, in fact, the fourth factor, which is affordability, because availability and affordability go together. Too much of emphasis clearly on just affordability is not, and that clearly has been one of the main, the negative features of in India, given the fact that there's a ever expanding list of essential medicine and the like and so on. So clearly, there is a lot of potential in the healthcare field and in pharmaceuticals in a general sense. And one would expect, in fact, this potential to be realized with, in fact, a more accommodating environment.
So you're saying that while yeah, there is a need to focus on moving ahead from generics. There's a lot of opportunity that lies within the domestic market, and the per capita consumption of medicine is low. Now, moving from all this, business talk and leadership talk, let me throw some rapid fire questions to you. These are around finance and your personal choices. So if you could answer quickly, that would help me. So let me start with my first one. One financial metric that you track daily or frequently without fail.
One metric that always interests me is essentially two metrics, I would say. One is the EBITDA margin, and the other is the return on capital employed.
Cost optimization or growth investments? What excites you more?
I would say growth investments because that's really for the long term, whilst cost reduction is very important. I'd also add a third measure in terms of return on time invested. So, spending time on the most important things.
Biggest challenge for a pharma CFO today: regulatory compliance or global market volatility?
I would say global market volatility is very important. Not that one derides, in fact, the compliance aspect of it, but the global factors do play an important role when it comes to evolution of pharma.
If not finance, where would you have been today?
Well, I would perhaps have been, a student for life, uh, a professor at some point, a mentor to a lot of other people, and so on. And of course, spending a lot of time with family.
Equity or debt? What's closer to your heart?
It's equity and debt. Both are important to me.
Excel or AI dashboards? Your preferred battlefield?
Well, I think I'm futuristic looking. So from that perspective, the AI battlefield.
Numbers or narratives? What wins in a boardroom?
Both. I mean, I think you can't, it's important to kind of have a command over both.
But is there one which is more
Numbers
important?
speak for themselves in some ways, whilst narratives could be long winding.
IPO roadshow or investor call? Which is more fun?
And I would say IPO roadshow. In fact, a roadshow is always very interesting. It's face
Uh,
to face and meeting a lot of people,
if CFOs had a superpower, which one would you choose? Forecasting the future or making regulators happy instantly?
forecasting the future for sure. That's more exciting.
Yeah, then you can eventually make them happy.
Great.
One book that you recommend to every finance professional.
Well, a lot of things have actually interested me. There's no one particular book that really stands out. But talking about reading, I've been looking at, in fact, the Apple in China story in recent times, and that's it's I find it pretty absorbing. I'm still going through that and learning a lot from it as well.
Right. Lastly, tea or coffee?
Coffee, clearly Chennai boy, so coffee.
Yeah, yeah. You have an energy of a coffee person. Thank you so much, Ramesh, for joining us here. It was enthralling to hear your views around business, leadership, and your journey into finance. It was really a lovely experience. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate this. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah.
Thank you.